Whoa, hold on there. I'm not trying to convert you to some religion or anything. I'm a deist. And that isn't a religion. It's just a belief that I have. And I want to explain it. So, what is deism? Well, according to Wikipedia, deism is a philosophical position and rationalistic theology that generally rejects revelation as a source of divine knowledge and asserts that empirical reason and observation of the natural world are exclusively logical, reliable, and sufficient to determine the existence of a supreme being as the creator of the universe. Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I believe there's a God for all intents and purposes, but not in the whole Jesus or Muhammad revelation thing. I'm more on the reason and observation side of things. Most theists believe the creator doesn't intervene in the universe. I'm mostly on board with that. I believe they maybe intervened once with the creation of life. We'll get to that later. But first, let's start at the beginning. The Big Bang. So, the Big Bang Theory. This is what all the smart science people say happened a very, very, very long time ago. Actually, it's so long ago, it's the start of time. It's the start of the universe. It's the Big Bang. Most of you probably already know what that is. But just to refresh you. According to this theory, the universe began as an infinitely small, hot, and dense point, which rapidly expanded and continued to stretch over billions of years. But that initial expansion was so fast and had so much energy that it's been coined bang. But there's a word at the end of it. What's that? Theory. Right, so why do I believe this theory? And why do all the big smart science people say this is what happened? Well, firstly, there's this thing called cosmic microwave background radiation. Basically, it's the leftover energy from the Big Bang, and we can still pick it up as microwaves today. That's how fucking big and fast this expansion was, that we can still detect its remnant heat in the vast voids of space 14 billion years later. In 1989, the Kobe satellite was launched. It looked out into space and observed slight temperature variations in this background radiation that matched theoretical models of a hot, dense, early universe expanding super fast and then cooling that eventually formed today's cosmic structures. Also, there's this thing called redshift. So when light travels to us from distant galaxies, it gets stretched out as the universe expands. For light, that stretching shifts it towards the red end of the spectrum, hence redshift. Basically, the farther away a galaxy is, the more its light redshifts. And when we look out at the universe, we see that all these galaxies are redshifting more and more, meaning they're moving away from us. But not just moving away, they're moving away faster and faster. They're accelerating. And if everything is constantly expanding outward, logically, in reverse, it all collapses into a single point. Right, okay. That was the easy stuff. Now for a bit more juicy science. So time, space, and matter, these things supposedly came out of the Big Bang. But what does that mean? Imagine two balls. So these two balls, without matter, well, they wouldn't even exist, right? Balls are made of matter, so no matter, no balls. Now, without space, they'd just kind of be in each other and mashed into a single point. No separation, just one infinitely tiny thing. And without time, well, they'd just stay there forever. They'd be frozen. But we know if you push one, it rolls. And stuff in the universe moves, so there's time. So these balls, with their time, space, and matter, will, if there's nothing else, move closer together. And that's kind of what gravity is. Getting even more brainy sciencey, Einstein, yeah, that clever fella, figured out that space and time aren't separate things. They're woven together into something called space-time. And if you chuck something heavy into it, like a planet, it bends space-time. You've probably seen this picture of it. The big grid with the dip around Earth? That's space-time being bent by the gravity of Earth. It's also why astronauts experience the time differently than we do down here. They have a different space from the matter, and so their time is affected. And when you take Einstein's field equations and general relativity, apply them to the universe and run them backwards, everything starts crunching together. Space gets smaller, time slows down, and all the matter gets denser and hotter. The math eventually hits a point where it breaks down completely, and it's like everything squashes together into something infinitely tiny. That's basically what the Big Bang is. It's not just where all the stuff came from, it's where time and space themselves began. So now, if we know that time, space, and matter came from the Big Bang, then surely whatever came before that had to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. So you might be asking, okay, cool, but what does that mean? What does it mean that whatever was before the Big Bang was timeless, spaceless, and immaterial? Well, here's the thing. If it was timeless, then the Big Bang couldn't have been spontaneous, since spontaneity implies a sequence in time before. Without time, there is no before. So whatever caused the Big Bang must be something that doesn't rely on time as we know it, and probably did it intentionally. This leads to Aristotle's idea of the unmoved first mover, which would take way too long to explain in this video. But basically, you can't have an infinite regress of cause and effect. Eventually, you need a starting point. This thing also just happened to make the universe come with all of the laws of physics perfectly in place. Like gravity, for example. If the gravitational constant were off by just 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, that's 1 with 60 zeros, stars and galaxies wouldn't have formed. Too strong? Everything collapses together. Too weak? Nothing comes together and forms, just scattered particles. Either way, we ended up on the knife edge of these governing laws that allow structures like stars and planets to form, and for those structures to interact with each other, following these laws in a way that makes new structures and a bunch of other cool shit. The scientist who first discovered the Big Bang Theory was a Christian priest. And all the other scientists were like, oh shit, no, that can't be right, because that proves, or at least points towards, the existence of a creator. They frantically tried to disprove it, but just came up with more evidence supporting it. So yeah, that's my first and kind of main reason why I believe in a god. But I don't infer anything from that. I don't know if it likes ice cream, I don't know if it likes the killing of children like the god of the Bible does. I don't know anything about this creator, just that it created the universe. So, DNA. Again, this is probably one that all of you would know. This beautiful double helix boy right here. But why does this convince me of a god? Surely you're jumping out of your seat. This proves the opposite. This is all evolution and science. Well, I'm going to tell you why DNA is so amazing that it reinforces, along with the Big Bang Theory, my belief in a god. What's compelling to me isn't DNA itself. Why would it be? We've explored it, mapped it, decoded it, but how it came to be in the first place. And that word, decoded, is interesting. Why do we say that? It's because DNA is literally code. It's structured information. We can measure it in megabytes, like a file. Each cell has about 715 megabytes of information. That's like 357 pictures of Jennifer Connelly. This code? It's a language, like binary. You've probably had to learn about it in science. A, T, G, C, wherever it was. The genetic alphabet. Literal language built into every cell. And here's the crazy thing. It's been the same since the very first organisms on Earth. And we're supposed to believe it's just randomly happened. A freak mix of chemicals made something that complicated, that structured, with a whole language. Now, am I saying an all-powerful deity was like, ah yes, let's put life on this planet, or I'll launch it from an asteroid? I don't know. I'm saying it probably didn't happen that way, but I'm not saying it didn't either. What I am saying is this. I believe there's some form of intelligence behind life even being able to come out of the materials in the universe. Because to have oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium and phosphorus coming together and arranging into things so complex, completely by chance, is just so incredibly unlikely to me. Fred Hoyle, one of the big brain scientists, once estimated that the probability of life forming on Earth by pure chance was 1 in 10 to the 40,000th power. To put that into perspective, that's like Miles Davis and Azealia Banks bumping into each other at an airport, hijacking a plane and crash landing it into a winning lottery ticket. So yeah, that's the second big reason why I believe there's a God. Between the Big Bang and DNA, those are the two that really sealed it for me. Alright, let's move on to some counter-arguments. So, the multiverse theory. This theory says there's countless, literally infinite other universes, so the one that we just happen to be in, having these very specific laws or having a life form, isn't really too, it's not that amazing. We just got a lucky one. We're in one of countless universes where all those constants are right. But there's countless of other universes with the wrong laws or different laws that form different things, with some with different rules of time and space and whatnot. So yeah, I think this one's a bit of a meh argument. Like, yeah, if there are infinite other universes, then this one wouldn't be that special. Life wouldn't be that amazing either, since technically it would happen an infinite number of times. But the issue is, there's no proof for it. I'd argue the multiverse theory actually takes more faith than believing in a god. Because you're not just suggesting something unseen, you're positing infinite unobservable realities, and yeah, you might say, well, it's possible, just like your idea. I mean, sure, they're both unprovable, but like William of Ockham said, the simplest answer is usually the right one. I'd say much the same thing about the cyclic universe theory. This theory says the universe has gone through infinite cycles of expanding massively, collapsing back down into a single point, and then expanding all over again. Like, yeah, you could argue there's no way of knowing, so maybe it's just as likely as anything else. But to me, that doesn't really solve anything. You still need a start to that. All it does is push the question back to the universe before, and the one before that. You still don't have a reason why there's stuff in the first place. I again refer to Aristotle's unmoved first mover. So yeah, abiogenesis. This is the idea that scientists have put forward that life came from non-living substances spontaneously combining. And another smart guy, Harold Urey, showed that organic compounds like amino acids, which are necessary for cellular life, could be formed under the conditions of early Earth. But for me, this argument doesn't really make sense as an argument against a creator. Because yeah, sure, the building blocks were there naturally, but the fact they can even combine into life, which, may I remind you, is this insanely complex thing, the fact that those chemical compounds can even get to that point, for me, just indicates that maybe the intelligence was ingrained to those raw materials in the first place. And let me remind you, I'm not saying this creator god came down to Earth and bam, complex life. But it's like if you went back 60 million years and saw a Honda Civic. You could say those dinosaurs over there made it, but after watching them for 5 minutes, I, and probably you, would come to the conclusion that they didn't make it, and there's probably some time-travelling engineer around the corner. And to emphasise this point, even Harold Urey, later in his career, said, all of us who study the origin of life find that the more we look into it, the more we feel it is too complex to have evolved anywhere. Divine hiddenness is this idea that, okay, well, if there is a god, why hasn't it intervened? Why hasn't it showed itself? Why did it let Rise of the Skywalker happen? Why does it let war happen? Why haven't we seen signs of it in the stars or whatever? And then some people go even further and say,
well, it's arrogant to think a god exists at all. Like the universe was just made so humans could appear.
But I'd ask a counter question. Why do you think a god would do that? I think humans throughout history have attached this weird expectation onto gods. And even atheists do it now, that if a god exists, it must care about us personally. I'm not saying that. I'm pretty sure the god that created this universe doesn't give a shit about humans. I'm just saying there's probably some intelligence behind life, not that it cares what that life does. In fact, I bet it doesn't. And this sort of ties into the simulation idea. Some people are like, well, maybe we're living in a simulation. And they'll use that to explain away the Big Bang or the laws of physics. But then they say, that's not God. And I'm like, what's your definition then? If someone created the universe that we're in, and we're conscious beings inside of it, I don't care if it's some guy on a computer or a cosmic being, I'd still call it a god. Alright, moving on to the last counter-argument. Science will get there. This argument basically says that since science has come so far already, eventually we'll figure it all out. We'll know why the universe has these specific laws, how life began, and maybe even look back and say, oh, life was bound to happen because of X, Y, and Z. But this argument doesn't really hold up for me, for two reasons. Firstly, it's a hasty generalization fallacy. Just because science has explained a lot already, doesn't mean it will explain everything in the future. Yeah, we understand evolution, we understand natural selection, but that doesn't mean we'll be able to explain how the entire mechanism itself came into existence in the first place. And secondly, when it comes to the creation of the universe, we're talking about something that, by definition, is outside of the scope of science. Science is the study of the observable universe, trying to study what came before the universe, or what started it. It's like if, 100,000 years from now, a society discovers a Shakespearean sonnet, but all record of Shakespeare himself has been lost. They could study that sonnet in extreme detail. They could learn everything there is to learn about iambic pentameter, rhyme schemes, and literary devices. But no matter how deeply they analyse it, they'll never know that he had a shit haircut, or when he was born. They'll never find Shakespeare inside that sonnet. So, these next reasons are going to be a bit more vibe-based. Not solid arguments or science-backed claims, but they still help convince me. Firstly, there's this inherent beauty that I think most humans, find in things. I went up a mountain recently, and at the top I saw the sunset, and it brought me to tears. I can't really explain the feeling. It wasn't just happiness. It was something else. Something beyond words. I just sat there, overwhelmed by how beautiful it was. And I don't understand why it hit me that hard. Same thing when I listen to music like Pharoah Sanders. That saxophone is so beautiful that sometimes I close my eyes and I'm just transported to another world. And for me, I can't see why that would be an evolutionary trait. I'm sure an evolutionary scientist could come along and give me a breakdown like, here's why you find sunsets beautiful, and here's why you have an emotional reaction to music. But for me, how I feel when I experience that beauty, it just makes me think there's something beyond the material. Something more than just neurons firing. This is probably one of the slightly stronger arguments for the immaterial. Consciousness. We know so little about what it actually is or why it arises. It's such a mystery that it's literally been called the hard problem of consciousness, because we don't even have the faintest idea. Now, we know the brain is somehow linked to it, right? Like, if you poke someone's brain, it'll make them think something. Or if they think a certain thing, something changes in the brain. You can see it happening. But here's where it gets weird. Close your eyes. I want you to picture a triangle. Now, make it yellow. Go on, close your eyes and picture it. That triangle has properties. It has 3 sides. It's yellow. All of its angles add up to 180 degrees. You can see it in your mind, so it exists somewhere. But if I cut open your brain, I'm never going to find that yellow triangle sitting there. It's not physically there, and yet you're seeing it. Okay, you can open your eyes now. That stuff, to me, just sort of points towards there being something that isn't material. Again, it's not a super strong argument because it's so unknown. You could easily say, well, it's clearly physical because, yeah, we can scan the brain, we've got psychology, neuroscience, all that. But there's something about consciousness specifically. You can picture things so clearly, and yet you can't find them anywhere in the body. That inner receptacle, the thing we experience the world through, it's such a massive mystery, and it's right there, right under our noses, well, behind anyway, every single day. That alone makes me believe there's probably something immaterial. So, in conclusion, that's why I believe there's a God. That's why I call myself a deist. I'm not trying to convert anyone or push anything. I just think it's fun to think about, and I wanted to share the ideas that I've had. There are plenty of good arguments for and against it. Technically, well, very technically, you could label me agnostic, because I think it's wrong for a man to say that he's certain of the objective truth. Like, yeah, maybe a religion has it right. Or maybe quantum physics figures it all out, and someday you go, oh yeah, there's clearly no God. Here's how it works. But practically, I'm like 99% convinced there's a God. I'm convinced in the same way that when there's lightning in a storm, I'm not going to be scared and think I'm going to be hit by the lightning. I believe the universe was created by an intelligence. I don't think that intelligence gives a shit about us, and that's why I'm in the middle. I'm neither religious nor atheist. I agree and disagree with both sides. But I am here arguing for a question that technically can't be answered, which some people might think is a bit pointless. But I think it's probably one of the most important questions to think about, and definitely one of the most fun and interesting. Anyway, that's been me. Thanks for watching.